Today we're diving into something we hear salon owners say all the time, and it's these words: I think I'm just burnt out. But what if what you're calling burnout actually isn't? What if it's something deeper? So today we're going to kick it off by first defining what burnout actually is.
Yes, because burnout is a physical or emotional exhaustion, especially as a result of long term stress or dissipation. So let's break that down even more because the word burnout comes from burn and out. And originally, it was used in the 1940s to describe engines that overheated and shut down. So later in the 1970s, a psychologist named Herbert Freudenberger, say that about 10 times fast, began using it to describe people. So especially volunteers or, helping professionals who felt emotionally depleted, detached, and drained. So
Yes.
think about that. Just like a machine burns out when energy is misused or overworked, people burn out when their purpose gets misaligned or when the pressure never stops and there's no relief in sight.
So good. So that brings me to like a recent coaching conversation that we had with a salon owner, and she started the call by saying, "You know what? I'm just burnt out." Like she kept saying it over and over, just burnt out. And I remember pausing and I asked her, I said, "Well, tell me what burnout feels for you, what it feels like for you." And she said, "You know what, Jen, I'm tired all the time. I feel numb. I keep going through all the motions, but I don't feel excited, like I used to." And as we talked about this, I realized that this wasn't burnout in the classic sense. It wasn't exhaustion from too many hours or lack of sleep. It was disconnection. She had lost touch with the very thing that made her want to lead in the very first place, which was actually developing people.
Yeah, and truly, what happened was she got stuck in the weeds of like payroll reports and
Mhm.
and really broken processes, and she forgot what her true passion was, which was coaching her team and helping them grow. So I think, what was really cool is once you cleared the word burnout and got really crystal clear about what she was actually feeling, everything changed. She didn't need a nap. She needed a realignment with her purpose. And that's the first key we want to offer you today is that burnout isn't always about energy. It's about clarity or lack of it. So let's talk about a few reasons salon owners feel burnt out, or at least think they do.
Yeah. So this one, I think, really resonates with a lot of people. It's the identity overload. So when you think about this, like you're wearing so many hats, like all the hats. You're the stylist, you're the owner, you're the trainer, you're the social media manager, you're the accountant, you're the therapist, you're the leader. I'm sure we could keep going on and on and on, right? Because that level of role switching, did you hear that? Role switching is mentally exhausting.
Yeah, I agree. I think the second one that I can think of is the chronic decision fatigue, because every day you're answering, what time should we post? We reorder that product line? Who's covering the front desk? It never ends and your brain never rests.
Yeah, that's like going home and like, don't ask me to make any more decisions. I don't want to know what we want to eat today. So that would be like chronic decision. You might be in chronic decision fatigue if you carry that on at home. So
Yeah.
another reason salon owners feel burnt out is the misaligned metrics. So if you think about this in this moment, like you're chasing goals that don't actually matter to you. Maybe you're trying to keep up with other salons online instead of focusing on what success looks like for you.
Oh, I love that one, Jen. I think another one that creeps up is isolation. And this is, truly being the boss can feel lonely, because you can't always talk to your team, you know, about a lot of things. And sometimes it feels like no one really understands the pressure that you carry.
Yeah, it's so good. I've heard that a lot. Being the boss can feel lonely.
Mhm.
And so when we move on to the next one, something that comes to mind for me is perfectionism. You're trying to make every team meeting expiring, your every service flawless and every marketing post polished. And honestly, sometimes at the end of the day, it's just not realistic. So here's the truth: that mental and emotional load isn't sustainable. And if you don't manage it with intention, it'll rob you of the joy you once had.
Yeah, this actually reminds me of a powerful concept from Napoleon Hill, where he talks about the difference between being driven and being a drifter. And, a driven person knows where they're going. They're intentional, focused, and they're operating with purpose. But a drifter lets life happen to them. They're busy, they're reactive, they're not really sure of their direction. And the scary part is you can drift and still be working 50 hours a week. You can be exhausted and still not be moving in the right direction. So if you're feeling like you're burning out, ask yourself this: am I drifting or driving?
Yeah. So now that we covered that, let's kind of dive into how to move forward, like how to reignite your purpose if you feel like the flame has gone out. And Lindsay, I can't remember. Do you remember where the word purpose came from, where it originated, the word itself?
I
You
mean,
had
I
told
know,
me.
I think it's a Latin word, that came from the intention or aim or goal was like
Yes.
where the root, it was prosper, to put forth.
To put
So,
forth. Yeah, thank
yeah.
you. I knew you would have the answer. Yeah, to put forth. So if you're like, what even is purpose? It's like,
Mhm.
it's having intention. It's knowing your goal, what you're aiming for. And
Mhm.
so, like, to move forward, like, a lot of times you got to reignite your purpose. And so, here is like a 5-step reset framework that works for us and for salon owners that we coach. And the very first important one is you want to clarify your core why. So, like, go back to the beginning. Like, have
Mhm.
some time with yourself. Why did you open your salon? Why did you want to lead? Write it down and keep it visible, because when the why is clear, the how gets easier. And I saw this with my grandmother. I feel like towards the end, she had lost her why. And I could see that in her. She was just ready to be done with it, right? And I could just imagine, like, if I would have been able to have the tools and the conversations, like, hey, let's get grounded back to why you even started this, it probably would have kept her going just a little bit longer. And so I think it's really important to know, like, let's get this why clear. And when we
Mhm.
do that, the how gets easier.
I love that so much. I keep my why right here near me in my view so that I can remember. And so I love that you said that, Jen. I think another part of this 5-step reset framework is step 2, which is delegate or delete. Because the truth is there are things you're doing that someone else on your team could thrive doing, and there are other things that just don't even need to be done at all. So, really, we invite you to use the mindset of who, not how. So stop asking, how can I do this? And start asking, who can do this better than me? Man, that is such a powerful book. If you haven't read it yet, go grab a copy. Who, not how. It will really shift the way that you see things in doing your business today.
It does. I remember Lindsay too, like his new book, The Science of Scaling, because we had the opportunity to meet Dr. Ben Hardy.
Yeah.
And he says it's now a super who. It's not just any who, but that super who. Like, if you
Mhm.
can really find that super who can do this better than you, man, that is so freeing. So I love that.
Mhm.
Another opportunity is to design rhythm, not balance. So balance is a myth. Like, instead, create rhythms that, like, work for your energy, they work for your priorities.
Mhm.
Maybe your Mondays are for creativity. Like, maybe your Fridays are for numbers. Put your people focused work where you feel most alive.
I love that. Put your people focused work where you feel most alive, Jen. That's
Mhm.
brilliant. Step 4 then is to recharge regularly. You know, you need daily rituals to fill your cup. Even if it's just 5 minutes of silence or stretching before the salon opens, and you need bigger breaks too, like quarterly retreats or a day off. Maybe if it's you're behind the chair, from behind the chair, just to vision cast. If we're not prioritizing that portion, because self care is, like Jen mentioned earlier with the decision fatigue, being able to still decide, like, hey, what's a wonderful, nutritious meal that I can make at the end of the day, instead of being like, oh, I'm so exhausted, I just don't even know. So really recharging regularly is going to be the key here.
Love that. And another opportunity is to audit your drift. So what we mean by that is like each week, just checking in with yourself, ask yourself, hey, am I being driven by my goals or drifting through my to-do list? That one question, you guys, can bring such massive clarity. And actually clarity comes from the root word clear. So it can bring so much clearness to you. So imagine you don't have that foggy brain anymore. Everything becomes clear. And so that one question can really clear the mind.
I love that, and one last thing that we want to leave you with, this comes from Russell Brunson, a good friend and mentor of ours, who's a marketing guru. But I think it applies here so well. We often use like hook, story, offer in marketing, right? But what if you used it on yourself? So imagine at the start of the day, like your hook could be, what excites you today? What's pulling you forward? So get crystal clear on that. And then the story part is, what moment or memory reminds you of why you do what you do? Maybe you just got a 5-star review that you want to celebrate. Maybe, somebody on your team just got to buy a new vehicle, or whatever that might be. What's that story or moment that reminds you of why you do what you do? And then the offer portion is like, what do you want to deliver to your team or your guests today? What's your promise? Because when you become crystal clear on that hook, story, offer, and you do that daily, you stop drifting and you start showing up on purpose.
Yeah, what did you say? You stop drifting and you start showing up on purpose. Now that's a writer downer. I love that one. So you're like, okay, this is cool, Jen and Lindsay, but like, I don't feel like I'm burnt out, but I hear it from my team. So let's move this focus on and talk about your team. So what do you do when a team member says, you know what, I think I'm burnt out? And the first thing you can do is honestly, just don't dismiss it. Even don't start giving them strategies right away. Like, even if you suspect it's not actual burnout, like take it seriously. Like saying, like maybe I'm burnout is usually code that, as a salon owner, when they're saying that, it's usually code for like, hey, I don't feel supported, I don't feel valued, or I'm not aligned. So here's how we recommend handling this. The first thing you want to do is really get curious, not defensive. So let me say that again, get curious and not defensive. And this is where you'll begin to ask open-ended questions like, hey, tell me more about how you're feeling, or hey, what's been weighing you down lately? Or, just remember, like, your goal isn't to fix, it's to understand. And like, let me say that again, because it's so good. Your goal isn't to fix, it's to understand.
I love that, and then I think once you've gotten curious and not defensive, then you can step in and clarify that language, clarify their language. So just like with the salon owner that Jen mentioned coaching, try to help your team member define what they mean by burnout. Because is it emotional, physical, creative, or is it actually a need for more structure, or, maybe more growth, or more connection? Really getting crystal clear on what it is, where this term burnout is coming from.
Yeah. And then, also get them reconnected to their purpose, and ask questions such as, hey, what part of your work feels most meaningful to you right now? And sometimes if they struggle to answer, it could be a red flag and a clue that they may be disconnected from their why. But that's the greatest opportunity you can give them, is help them get reconnected to that purpose.
And Jen, I think you mentioned this earlier when we were talking about, recording this, like purpose can be a confusing thing when you ask
Mm.
people, what is your purpose? So we probably wouldn't recommend saying, what is your purpose? But using that great question that Jen just asked, because then sometimes people get wild ideas like, oh, well, I think my purpose is to go, save the honeybees in Africa. And hey, if that's truly what you want to do, that's amazing, but they got into this field for a reason. So it's important to ask them, what part of your work feels most meaningful to you right now? Because that's their
Mhm.
purpose in this work. They chose this for a reason. So don't say, what's your purpose? Ask them, what part of your work feels meaningful to you right now? So, and then the next part is then to really look at what's on their plate, because burnout can also come from role confusion, you know and sometimes, I've noticed over the years, like the most stable thing in people's lives is actually usually what they blame first. And so, if
Mm.
you're listening to this, or if you're a lot of our clients that we work with, a lot of our salon owners that we work with, we know, listen to the podcast. A lot of people who aren't yet with salon business school, that are checking things out, have wonderful teams as well. But when they have that role confusion, a lot of times they'll say like, hey, this is the most stable environment, I'm going to try to create chaos here, but really what they're trying to tell you is, hey, there's like role confusion. What's on their plate? Really, there could be a lack of clear systems or unclear expectations. But you all you can do is control this environment. So make sure your expectations are realistic and also well communicated.
Yeah, so good. And then the other thing is, you guys, don't offer a bubble bath, like offer a breakthrough. Actually, we used to have someone that used to work here, no longer does, and that's what her recommendation. She would coach some, and she would just say, offer them self care. Self care. I was like, oh gosh, I don't know if that's going to work. It's not working. So yeah, because what was happening is she was never just giving them the place for transformation, right? And so they were living in that safe space. Yeah, they might have went and done some self-care for an hour and felt a little bit better, but then their reality came back to them, and so they never got a breakthrough. And so yes, rest is important, but true rejuvenation comes from progress. Help them see a future vision that excites them. And sometimes the most energizing thing is like feeling seen, feeling heard, and giving a path forward. So if you're feeling burnt out today, maybe, or if they're feeling burnt out, you can pause and ask them, hey, what's the most important thing we can accomplish today together? And just, understanding where they're coming from and listening to them really creates an amazing environment.
I love that. Yes, salon owners, this one is for you. You don't need to quit. You don't need to escape. You just need to reconnect to your people, your vision, and most importantly, your purpose. And if this resonated with you, share it with another salon owner who might be feeling the same, or who could use those amazing tools with their team as well, because you're not alone and burnout doesn't get the final say. We look forward to seeing you next time.